Welcome to the Wired for Success podcast, your show for ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneurs who want to build million-dollar businesses without sacrificing their health, relationships, or happiness, who understand that in order to build their empire, they need a solid foundation, and that the more they are thriving, the more their business is thriving too. This show brings you the very best from science, self-development, and entrepreneurship to set you up for sustainable success. Hi, I'm Claudia Garbutt, the scientist turned mindset and high-performance coach for entrepreneurs, and I help you get wired for success. Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Wired for Success podcast, where we talk about all things science, self-development, and entrepreneurship that help you get to that next level of success in your life and business. And today I'm bringing you a new and exciting interview episode. My guest today is author, speaker, and functional medicine specialist, Dr. Shane Steadman. Shane is a board-certified chiropractic neurologist, a chiropractic nutritionist, and the owner of Integrated Brain Centers in Denver, Colorado. He is a fellow of the American Association of Integrative Medicine, and he has completed numerous hours of postgraduate and advanced studies in functional neurology and functional medicine through the University of Bridgeport. In 2014, Shane was awarded Educator of the Year by the International Association of Neurology and Rehabilitation. And in 2021, he co-published Concussion Discussions, a functional approach to recovery after brain injury. So I'm really looking forward to my chat with Shane today, and I'm sure we can all learn a thing or two from this wonderful guest. Welcome, Shane, and thank you so much for being on my show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, it's going to be a lot of fun. So, Shane, can you please tell us a little bit about your background and how and why you became an expert in functional medicine?
Well, I guess a great place to start is when I was in high school, my mom actually worked for a chiropractic neurologist that did functional medicine. Right. So a lot of times people get into, their business role or become a doctor based on, something that happened to them, and so this was kind of a little bit different because I was actually a music major. And so I had a full ride scholarship for music. And I remember like halfway through, I was like, I really want to do what that guy did. Cause my mom would come home with all these amazing stories. And so I was like, I want to do what that guy did because, because the goal is kind of help people. And so, what kind of profession can we help people? And being a music major, I was like, well, I can help kids. That's super awesome. But, it's hard to find a job or, you end up doing a lot of teaching, on the side or, lessons. And I was like, I think I want to, become a doctor and do what that guy did. So I went to school to do just that. So, I got my chiropractic degree, and then I got my postdoctorate degree in neurology and my postdoctorate degree in nutrition. And so my kind of passion was, can I bring two worlds together of neurology and functional medicine and help people that, don't know where else to turn to, when life gets hard and their health isn't doing well.
Oh, I love that. Maybe can you share or can you tell our listeners how the functional medicine approach is different from the traditional medicine approach? Can you maybe share a patient story to illustrate why we should all pay more attention to functional medicine?
Yeah, so traditional medicine, and I don't ever want this to come across as knocking that profession. Yeah, so traditional medicine, they're well trained as diagnosticians. They can figure out what's going on with people pretty quick. The approach is, I think, different. So we can also diagnose, we look at the same kind of things, but somebody has, that was a good question, coming up with something that like a patient story. So I did we have a patient right now in the office. So she just came in yesterday. So she has Parkinson's, right? And so with Parkinson's, there's two major medications they give. They give L-Dopa, or carbidopa. So those are kind of the two medications. And, she's doing well, but the problem is she's really stiff in the morning. And so she has to take her medications, and now she can move, but then she has a movement disorder. So now she's, as she's talking, her body moves, and so then they've upped her medication, and now she takes the medication every 2 to 3 hours just so she can function. So that's your traditional approach. So the functional medicine or functional neurology approach is to say, okay, what's going on within the brain, what's going on within the body that could be contributing to this? So we know there's degeneration, right? Because that's how we get to that point of Parkinson's. But now the question is, why do we have Parkinson's? Is it because, we have an autoimmune disease in the brain? Is it because we have neurodegeneration? Is it because there's a genetic disorder? Is there because there's trauma, or is there a dementia piece? Because Parkinson's can also be associated with dementias. So we started kind of trying to break that down and saying, well, where did this come from? And then what things can we apply, or what modalities can we apply to improve functionality? So can we use IV therapies? Can we use dietary changes? Can we look at inflammatory processes and reduce the inflammation so that the brain is able to work better? All the while we're doing brain rehab. So we might do things to improve the frontal lobe or to improve the area of the brain called the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia is what kind of helps to coordinate that movement or modulate it, is like your on and off switch. So that's kind of the approach that we have that's different than traditional medicine. And I think there's a time and a place for both. But I think when you understand the two worlds, you can bring them together. And then that's how we're able to serve a lot of different patients, whether it be lupus or Parkinson's or migraines, vertigo, things like that, is there always has to be a cause. And then how do we address the cause, and how do we make the person better so that they can function the best that they can?
I love that broad approach, and that you're not just married to, say, medication, but you have behavioral approaches or different kind of ways that you can address the underlying causes. And what I always find fascinating is that connection between our beliefs and our behavior, and how our beliefs really shape our everyday behavior, which can be, of course, good or bad, depending on the context and the goals that we want to achieve, right? So in entrepreneurship, for instance, it's a common myth that you have to subscribe to that toxic hustle culture and you have to work 24/7 to become successful. And even though this belief is very common, it's not necessarily true. Are a lot of successful entrepreneurs hustlers? Yes, of course. But does this mean that there are no alternatives to that lifestyle? No, of course not. So to me, this is an example of a dangerous myth that leads to a lot of damaging behavior that ultimately jeopardizes people's long-term well-being and health. So regarding functional medicine, what is one common myth that drives you nuts and that you would like to bust today?
And I would love to answer your question. So I heard everything but your question, because there was just a quick glitch in the system. So ask that last question and then I'm going to answer it.
Sure thing. So regarding functional medicine, what is one common myth that drives you nuts and that you would like to bust today?
As far as functional medicine goes?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think the biggest myth that kind of drives me crazy is that, it's interesting because I probably have a bunch in my head, but when somebody actually asks you, you're like, well, let's think about this more. I think sometimes there's that notion that, oh my gosh, that's a good one. Because a lot of people think that it could be, it's kind of the term is like voodoo. Sometimes you feel like this is kind of voodoo medicine, or it's not real medicine, and that I think gets really frustrating, because the pieces that we learn in functional medicine, and I lecture on functional medicine and functional neurology all over the United States. And, so I know what I teach, and what we teach is very scientifically based, it's very research based, but sometimes it kind of gets, downplayed as, they don't really know what they're doing, or they're just being very subtle, and those are some of the things I think are frustrating, because in our office, we see people getting better every day. Every Monday morning, we go over our patients' successes, and we have a success board, and we go over that, because I think that's important to recognize that we are making a difference, and that some days are really tough and some days are really, easy. Some patients are hard and some patients are less hard, but at the end of the day, we're still making changes in people's lives. And to me, I think it gets frustrating when you kind of downplay a profession when you really don't know everything about that profession. And at the end of the day, in a way, who cares, right? We're still getting people well. we're still giving people their lives back. We're still making a difference in this world. So we shouldn't have anything negative to say, in my opinion. It's like if we are harming the patient, then by all means you should have a comment. But if we're not harming the patient and we're giving lives back and making families better, then I think that's what probably frustrates me the most, because I think most of us that do this, we get up every single morning and we get ready and we bust our butts to make sure that we can help people, So
yeah,
I would say that's probably the most frustrating.
I feel your pain because a lot of people think the same thing about mindset. So they think it's a lot of woo-woo and it's not grounded in science, when there's actually a lot of real hard science to support the brain-mind connection and how it all works together. So I feel your pain. What would you say? What does believing in this myth, what behaviors does this promote? So in other words, what are people doing or not doing because they believe this to be true? And how does this have a negative impact on their lives?
I think when you're believing in that myth, I think what happens is then you don't seek care, you just believe in one piece. And it doesn't even have to be a belief system. You just, you're buying into one system. And I think as we evolve, as technology evolves, social media evolves, all of this gets better and better and better. We start realizing there are so many opportunities out there, and there's so many different ways to approach a situation that it doesn't have to be this one way that And I think sometimes we get a little bit narrow-minded. And so I think if you believe in these myths, I think you become a little too narrow-minded in what really is going on in the world, and all the different approaches or all the different ways you can be helped. And oftentimes we hear patients that come in and they say, man, if I would have only known that this existed 5 years ago, 2 years ago, but they were, just for whatever reason, it could have been their upbringing, could be the people in their lives, their community, their friends, but they had a very narrow view of what they can do. And I think that can spill into every aspect of your life, right? If you're too narrow-minded, then you don't get to see all the approaches and all the ways of living and all the types of people that are out there. And so I think believing in that kind of myth, it can be really dangerous and limiting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're trying to do the best that we can as people. Then how does that limit our growth and our success and what we can achieve? And so, I think on a functional medicine scale, I think it's a negative myth that could be very detrimental, but I think globally and personally, it can also have some negative impacts.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And what I really love about your approach is that you're looking at the causes and not just the symptoms. And that's kind of exactly the mindset that I use in my coaching approach as well. So instead of trying to help a client by making them go through a cookie cutter program and hoping that they will find at least some of it useful, I meet them where they're at, and then I customize the approach based on their overall goals and current struggles. And that way we can address problems in real time without losing the big picture. And because things like the brain-body connection are vitally important, we examine different areas of their lives to find the root causes for their current problems. So in my sustainable success framework, for instance, we look at the things that help keep your body healthy, like nutrition, hydration, exercise, sleep, relaxation, these kind of things. But we also look at the things that are important for your mental and emotional well-being, like mindset in general, unsupportive beliefs, emotional mastery, internal dialogues. And then we look at how you interact and connect with others and the world in general. So think attachment patterns, community, spirituality, finding purpose and fulfillment. And last but not least, we bring all those aspects together by creating healthy, high-performance habits that really help my clients embody their goals and create sustainable success. So speaking of high-performance habits, would you share your personal high-performance habits with us? What do you do on a daily basis to stay healthy, happy, and productive?
I can tell you, as I've gotten older, I've learned more, so if you were to ask me 19 years ago when I started practice, I've learned so much. And I agree with you, I agree with the root cause concept. I think you and I are on the exact same page. I think probably the most important thing that I have learned is self-care. And I think ever since I've been better at that and engaged in that, and I would actually say about 3 years ago, which sounds, some people are like, what? That took a long time. You can, people can have different opinions, but I tell you what, it's like when you walk in the shoes of an entrepreneur or business owner, it's not an easy world. And, and I think you get caught up, and sometimes when you get into these roles of helping people, your whole world is is consumed by helping people. Yeah. So then what happens? We get put on the back burner. Our health is on the back burner, which is great because sometimes you have this sense of like, I'm doing things well because so-and-so got better. We help these many people, whatever the case may be, but what does that do? And so I think that's what I've learned is, I can go through life and have a successful practice and have this could be successful and this could be successful, but if I'm not healthy enough to enjoy it, then what was it all about? And so I would say probably about 4 years ago now, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, my whole practice actually took a dip, and it was a little bit scary. And it was just, we had some staff, we had some like toxicity, and within 3 months just started tanking the whole entire practice. And it was a very scary year. It was one of those years you're like, it was like very turbulent, when you're on an airplane, they're like, buckle up, it's going to be turbulent. It was super turbulent. And I think by the end of that year, with all the stress, and I think it was just like the straw that broke the camel's back, that expression that we hear. And so I think by the end of the year, I was in counseling. And so I think it was at that moment where I was like, okay, I have to take care of me, and I have to engage in self-care, which is weird because it's like one of the hardest things to do. And I know some people, if you've always done that, then, hands off, to you, because I don't think that's the norm, and so I think it's from that point I was like, I need to engage in self-care, and that takes a lot because it's almost an act of selfishness.
It's an important mindset shift, and it can feel selfish if you're not used to taking care of yourself.
100%. So that takes a little bit to get used to, right?
It does.
Because you have to say, no, I'm not going to answer this email. I have to take care of myself. No, I'm not going to do this for somebody. I need to take care of myself. No, I'm going to put you off a little bit because I need to take care of myself. And it's a great mind shift, but it's still a mind shift, and it can be really hard. So I think that was probably one of the best things that I ever did that was like high performance. I mean, I know there's people like, they can time block like none other. I've met those people, and people that get to work at 4:30 and they jot down and they visualize what the day is going to be, and the patient's getting better, or the people getting better, or making this deal or closing the sale. Like I know that's all there. And I do believe that's all important, but I think at the end of the day, you can still do that. But if you're still not healthy, and you're not engaging in self-care, I think I've gotten to the point as I get older and being in business for almost 20 years, I think if you don't do that, I think you have to take care of yourself first so you can take care of others.
That's so true. And that's exactly what I help my clients with, because so many entrepreneurs fall into exactly that trap. And I've been there myself. I've been through burnout and all the bad things. So I know what I'm talking about. And I also know that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that you can create those habits that support your health. And you don't have to subscribe to that toxic hustle culture. Now, I would love to talk a little bit about nutrition and diet for a moment. So what does your diet look like? And do you use protocols like caloric restriction or intermittent fasting, for instance?
So what I do, I was trying to see how I want to answer that. Those are two questions. So let's talk about caloric restriction and protocols. I am not a big fan of protocols. I know there's a ton of protocols and everybody has their system. I think people do better when they have a protocol or a system, because I think people do well when there's a plan. Exactly. If there's not a plan, it's really hard to follow. I think us as human beings like to know our boundaries, and we like to have a plan of action. And And I think that's every time I fail as a doctor, that's usually because I wasn't clear on a plan. You know, so I've gotten really good at saying, okay, here's our plan, even if it's what's our plan for the next week, you know? So I'm not a big fan of protocols, but I do believe that each of those diets have a purpose. Going back to what you're saying earlier, it's customizable. Some people do really well on intermittent fasting. Some people don't. Some people, I actually talked to last week to a patient about caloric restriction, you know, like, you know, basically calories in, calories out. That's not my favorite concept, but in this case, I thought it was the best plan for this patient to get her to understand what I was trying to accomplish with her. Right. So we can talk about, you know, AIP diets, paleo diets, you know, Mediterranean diets, FODMAP diets, intermittent fasting, 14, 12, 16, 18. There's so many things out there.
I know.
What is the best for the person is kind of what it is. So I think if somebody's like, ooh, I'm going to listen to what he has to say right now, because he's going to tell me the magic bullet on how I can feel better. I'm like, I don't know if I have that magic bullet, because when you actually understand a person, what they're going through, their lifestyle, their metabolic factors, then you say, well, here's maybe the best diet. Intermittent fasting, it is kind of really awesome. There are some people that need to eat breakfast or they're not going to function very well for the day. You know, and does intermittent fasting always mean that you skip breakfast? You know, can you skip dinner?
You can.
And it's just a period of fasting. And so I think some people kind of get stuck in that, going like, oh, I have to skip breakfast. And then they end up skipping breakfast, not eating until 1 or 2 or 3 because they got busy. And now they're coming to my office trying to figure out why they get migraines. You know, so it's all over the place. So, you know, for me, what I do nutritionally is, you know, I do better with breakfast. I mean, I can do intermittent fasting, but I do better with breakfast. So in the morning, I make sure I have, like, you know, good fats and good protein. You know, I'll even do like a nutrition shake that we have here, just, you know, because I can get some more vitamins and minerals, and, you know, and I put my supplements in there, and, you know, that's how I get started in the morning, you know, and then I make lunch, you know, I'm very kind of traditional and basic on that. Like I brought my lunch here this morning. And so we have some chicken and some vegetables, and, you know, and so I brought my lunch and got snacks, and, you know, and so I try to eat healthy. So I do, you know, in my household, we do gluten-free, dairy-free. Not everybody has to be dairy-free, you know, but we do gluten-free, and we don't do dyes, and we don't do preservatives, and we try to eat as healthy and organic as we possibly can. But I've also learned that, I mean, you can be incredibly hardcore strict, and those people are super amazing, and I applaud them, but it can also be really hard if you go out with friends, or, you know, I was out of town for a soccer tournament last weekend, you know, and, you know, we did pretty darn well, you know, but, you know, was it organic all the time? No, you know, but we did really well. So I think because we take care of ourselves, I think we can afford these times when we don't do well, you know, so I think we have a lot more leeway in our life. You know, this weekend I'm going to, my daughter's a junior high school, so now we're going to a soccer recruiting college camp thing in the middle of nowhere. And so I'm like, I don't think there's going to be anything gluten-free. So we're going to have to find food. You know, so we do the best we can. And I think we do a really good job, but that's kind of how my nutrition is. I take supplements, you know, and I take care of myself and my adrenals and my brain and my inflammation. And I try to do a good job of self-care.
I like what you said there. And based on the research that I've seen and what I've heard from longevity experts like Harvard Medical School Professor Dr. David Sinclair, I have created my own protocol, but I'm kind of like you. So I say right away, I'm not perfect when it comes to sticking to it. But I'm also not aiming for perfection here, because as a matter of fact, I have regular cheat days. And the thing is, having those regular cheat days makes it so much easier to stick to an overall healthy diet, because you don't have to be so hard on yourself all the time. And that's the big benefit from a mindset perspective. But I also think that it's a good idea for another reason that I don't really hear people talk about. And that is is metabolic flexibility. So the more I restrict myself to a certain protocol over a longer period of time, the more I lose the metabolic flexibility to respond and adapt to conditional changes in metabolic demand, right? So in oversimplified terms, you could say if I stopped eating sugar and I never eat sugar, my body eventually forgets how to properly handle sugar, for instance. And that's certainly not what I want. So I do want to limit compulsive overconsumption and all the associated negative consequences. But I also want to stay metabolically flexible enough to digest a wide variety of foods. It's kind of like the difference between being a generalist and becoming a specialist. When it comes to my metabolism, I want to be a generalist and not a specialist, if that makes sense. So for me, it's really about sticking to a healthy diet most of the time, but then also enjoying a piece of my favorite cake every now and then without feeling guilty or worrying about the sugar. So what are your thoughts on that?
I actually have some strong opinion. I like your thoughts. Actually, I'm gonna give you one thing to maybe change your mindset.
Ooh, okay, go for it.
So, yeah, I think what's great about being in business for 19 years, being in practice, is you learn so much. I think one of the biggest aha moments I had a few years back is, and I've had counselors. So my practice is not just me. I have nutritionists, counselors, rehab therapists, nurse practitioners. So, we have a very integrated clinic. One of the things that I really found interesting, and it was kind of these aha moments in the practice, is that I think when you become really restrictive, I think when you are so limiting, and there's reasons for it, but then there's also some people who don't, it's easy to develop disordered eating. Yeah. And so I've kind of come to the conclusion that I think it's really important to have a positive relationship with food. So we want to talk about mindset, right?
Yeah.
You need to have a positive relationship with food, because I think all too often in functional medicine and functional nutrition in this holistic space, sometimes I think there's such a negative connotation with food. That, if I do that, it's going to hurt me. If I do that, it's going to hurt me. If I cheat, it's going to hurt me. And sometimes what happens is that your brain will start to agree with you, right? To make it simple. It's like, so you eat something, right? And also you're like, I think it caused it. Oh yeah, I think it did. Oh yeah, and now I have I can't do that. I just can't do that. I know better, and then it turns into this weird shame spiral. And then sometimes you see another person like, I don't have any problems, and they eat that, and you're like, I guess you don't have any problems. It's like, so when we go back to what you had mentioned about the brain body connection, like that also plays a role in this too. And so I think that's another reason why I try not to have like all these protocols and restrictions. I mean, I've met patients that, for 10 years, they've only eaten 10 foods, wow. in their menu. And it's super sad. Yeah. Do some of them have organic issues? Absolutely. Do some of them have non-organic, meaning have they kind of created this mindset around it? That's a big possibility too. Right. So if your brain is powerful enough to cause phantom limb pain, right? You don't have an arm, but you have pain in this arm. Is it strong enough to cause other issues? I believe it is. And I've seen people get better, kind of addressing this. So I'll give you a little fun thing to change your mindset. I'm not going to take any credit. Actually, I was watching an old nutritionist of mine on social media about 2 weeks ago. She posted this and I was like, oh, that's brilliant. So instead of calling it a cheat day, I think she called it, I have to remember now what she called it. She called it like a fun day or a freedom day. Yeah, freedom day or something like that, right? Because
I like that.
she even posted on her social media that she's like, why does it have to be cheating?
Exactly.
Because that's a negative connotation. She goes, why does food always have to be negative? So she goes, why can't it just be, I'm going to have a fun day?
I like that. Yeah, a fun day, a freedom day, a flexibility day.
Yeah, exactly. So
let's call it that.
Yes, I'll give her the credit, but I was reading her post a couple weeks ago and I was like, oh, I'm going to change that. So
yeah, I'm going to change that going forward. I like that.
but it's so easy because it rolls off our tongue. And I think with food, it's sad because everything does have a negative spin. We've always thrown a negative spin as a society on it, unless you're perfect. But even perfection, I mean, you talk to any counselor and even perfection has its own issues. And there's a lot of control issues that go into perfectionism. and shame as well.
Absolutely.
So it's like, so if you have somebody that's trying to be perfect, how much shame do they have, or how much controlling issues do they have? And if not, then they're throwing negative and that's why I use the term like disordered eating versus an eating disorder, because you have the eating disorders, but you have disordered eating. I might have to take a sip of water. That's an important notion, so if we understand that, we got to have a better relationship with our nutrition, our food, and ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. I think aiming for perfection is always dangerous. If we aim for, say, 80-20, that would be sufficient, right?
Absolutely.
So, the year is still relatively young as we were recording this. So I think it's still fair to ask, what are your big goals for your personal life as well as for your business in 2022?
So personally, I'm working on me a lot. So I've been constantly doing that, which is good. I think self-care is kind of, and I try not to do these things like, well, that's my mantra right now, so that's what I'm going to talk about. But I think it's an important piece, and I don't think it doesn't seem to end, because I think life changes.
Absolutely.
Like I said, I got one kid who has special needs. He's got an ultra rare disorder, so that poses a stress in my life. And I have a daughter who's super active, and, so we're trying to make the best of her world and her, upbringing. And I have a wife, and I have a business, and I have a practice. And so life changes. And so I think I'm trying to do a really good job. And personally, that's my goal. So I'm going to keep working on that, and being the best version of me as possible. Professionally, we're working on just growth right now. Probably my biggest professional goals over the past 2 to 3 years have been systems and efficiency. So how can we simplify, and how can we be more efficient without jeopardizing anything with the patient? So I think I use the word patient, but people can use the word client. I think to be patient-centered is the most important piece, because it is all about them. When they come in the office, it's about them. But how can we be better to have better systems so that they get the best care possible? And so that's kind of been my focus professionally. And I think it's worked, because I think, we've actually grown over the past 2 years, which not a lot of businesses can say that. But I think that was my focus, is like, how can we be more efficient? Because if we're more efficient, then the patients are better, right? Or we're able to serve our patients better, or we're not dropping the ball, or they don't fall through the cracks, or we don't forget something, or they got everything they needed, and that's kind of been my goal professionally. So we're actually really busy, which is awesome. I think it's about 6 to 8 weeks to even get into our office. So that makes me very proud, but also that poses another issue.
Sure.
How do we take care of those people that really need us? And so, even right now, we're in the process of hiring another neurotherapy assistant to help kind of offload from the doctor, so we can open our schedule, so we can get those people in sooner. So that's kind of where I'm at professionally, is just being efficient. And I think that's where the awesomeness comes in, is to be efficient, because you meet a lot of businesses that are not efficient at all, and those ones that are super successful are these big corporations. I mean, they do have very systematic, efficient, it's a machine that's well ran. So, and I think in small businesses, we don't have very well ran machines in small business. It's kind of a cluster bomb. And I think too, I feel like now I'm getting out soapbox, but I feel that sometimes your business is a reflection of the business owner.
Always.
And I think if the business owner is a hot mess, then I think your business is a hot mess. So, which is another reason why I'm focusing on self-care. If I focus on me and I make sure I'm not a hot mess, I can be a better boss / mentor for my employees. And if we can do that, then we can also serve the population well.
Great. I totally agree with that. And I wish you best of luck with your goals this year. And before we go, so I'm a huge book nerd, so I'd love to know, what are your maybe 1 to 3 all-time favorite nonfiction books, and what can we learn from them?
Oh, that might be not the best question, because my daughter is always like, Dad, you never read. I'm like, I read all the time. I'm reading articles.
Okay, can be a fiction book then, whatever you're reading to your daughter.
Oh my gosh, I have to figure this out. I know, because I think I spend most of my time reading articles. It's just like, somebody comes in with a unique condition, and then I'm like reading articles and PubMed and trying to figure out different pieces. So I'm like, yeah, oh my goodness, man, you should have prepped me on this one.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I'm looking at all your books behind you going like, oh my gosh, you're definitely a book nerd. I think it's awesome. Oh my goodness. Oh, actually, it's a good book is, it's called Servant Leadership. That's a really good one. So what's great about that book is it takes this whole concept of leadership and it flips it upside down. I think it goes back to like a patient-centric mentality, so that if a lot of times I think in business, right, we say we're the most important piece as the business owner, so everything has to benefit us at the end of the day. And I think Servant Leadership is a book that kind of flips that whole concept upside down. It says that, so if you look at the pyramid, right, and if the business owner is the top of the pyramid, you flip the whole pyramid upside down, right. And now your clients are the most important piece. So I think that was kind of a really good book to kind of shape some of this. And actually, I did read that several years ago before this all, as this was kind of evolving. It's like, how do we flip that upside down? What else?
Sounds good.
We'll leave it on that, because I know there's other books, but like my daughter's like, Dad, you never read. I'm like, I read all the time. It's just articles.
That's totally fine. One book is perfect. So, excuse me. And last but not least, what is the best place for our listeners to find you online if they want to connect with you?
So we have two different websites. We have more of our functional medicine website and our brain, because we try to not confuse people too much, but integratedbraincenters.com is our neurologic functional neurology website. And then integratedhealthdenver.com is our functional medicine. So we kind of said, we bring kind of these two worlds together, but they're very integrated. So we do have, the counselors and nurse practitioners and all the stuff like that. So if people want to, catch us on those two websites, is great. We do, we're on social media too, with Instagram and Facebook and things like that. I think what's good about connecting with us is not just to promote, but we actually do webinars, and so I think if you're connecting with us through social media, we post our webinars that we do, and we try to do them at least once a month. They're very educational. I think we try to educate the public as much as we can. So, this month of March, we did, dysautonomia, the month of April is going to be thyroid, and then we're going to go into like gut issues and digestion. We've done ADD, we've done brain injuries, so we have different topics where it's kind of fun. From an office standpoint, we actually have a little bit different format. We keep changing it based on the response that we get, but we don't have the typical, like, you sit there as we're like clicking through slides. At one point, we actually had the entire office and we opened it up where anybody can be on Zoom and ask questions, like a bunch of friends. And we just started talking, awesome. And we just said, here's our topic and let's just talk about it and let's have fun. So it was kind of fun because I think people got to see our personalities as we banter back and forth and laugh at each other and, and educate on a topic. And so, we try different formats, but I think if you stay connected with us through social media, you can be up to date on when we do those webinars, and you just register for it and hop on and listen and ask questions.
That sounds like fun. So yeah. Again, thank you so much, Shane, for sharing all those tips and insights with us today. I really appreciate it. And it has been a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks for having me. This has been great.
Thank you. Take care and talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Wired for Success podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, please take a sec to rate and review my show or share it with a friend. That way you can support the show and help me reach and support other entrepreneurs like yourself as well. If you would like my help to figure out how you can go from overwhelmed and overworked hustler to empowered and confident leader, check out my website at www.wiredforsuccess.solutions and book a free 20-minute strategy session with me. Can't wait to help you get wired for success. Until next time, take care. Bye.